SWAT? Really?
I suck at golf.
You spend time in the Middle East?
More than I would have liked.
I worked in Kabul with Médecins Sans Frontières and in 2020 at the maternity hospital. I met the most incredible, bravest doctors there.
Vashti Barchi. Tragedy. We should grab a beer sometime, share war stories.
I'd like that.
She seems cool.
Yep, maybe. I could be around long enough to find out.
Welcome to the Pitt podcast, the official companion to the Pitt on HBO Max. I'm Dr. Alok Patel, physician, journalist, and I would talk about the show every day if I could.
And I'm Hunter Harris, a screenwriter and cultural critic. Today it's 1 o'clock on the Pitt, it's episode 7, and we get to hear from the people who keep the Pitt running, the nurses. We'll hear from Amielynn Abellera, who plays Nurse Perlah, and Kristin Villanueva, who plays Nurse Princess.
I can just look at Amielynn/Nurse Perlah, and I know that something's up. You know, we work alongside together. It also helps that we're friends, both on camera and off camera, so I can feel her energy and no words are needed.
We want to talk about the real challenges nurses face in today's world, and we're going to talk to the people who make sure those stories are told accurately in the Pitt. Today's shift starts now.
Let's start with character and then we can move to medicine. How does that sound?
I mean, you know how I roll. That sounds perfect.
Okay. The most maybe heartbreaking sequence this episode was the sexual assault victim that Nurse Dana is giving this examination to. And I really appreciated that this examination kind of takes the whole episode. Like, we keep kind of going back and watching Dana with this patient, and you get a sense of like how invasive this is and how vulnerable it is for this woman.
I think that's exactly why it was included.
Yeah.
This situation happens. Sexual assault is a known issue, and there's so much that happens in the duality of medical care, but also in kind of giving a victim that privacy, reestablishing trust, kind of that duality of humanity in medicine, which Charge Nurse Dana nails.
You are in control now, Alana. We're here to help and support you. Once I open this kit, I cannot leave the room. But if you need a break or some air, just let us know, okay?
There's also so many like logistical things to collecting all this evidence. And I did not realize that like Dana like can't leave the room, that she has to, you know, kind of be like glued to her chair, and she can't like be in the ED, like running stuff as she normally would be. So everyone else is like kind of caught a little bit off guard, I would say, without her leading the ship.
And she really owns her role. And
Yeah.
she kind of steps, like, as you mentioned, they keep going back to the episode, and she's in that room, and obviously it's a private room, there's privacy, and there's nothing in the background, and Nurse Dana is focused on that situation.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Al-Hashimi comes in, runs the medical screen, which is appropriate to make sure, is there any acute injuries that need to be addressed? And then Charge Nurse Dana is assuming the role of a sane or a safe nurse, a sexual assault nurse examiner, or a sexual assault forensic examiner. And you're right, she follows a protocol, but also just the language she uses, the trauma-informed wording when she says things like, you're in control now. Really powerful scene.
Yeah. There was one moment where I think she was like about to hug the patient and then kind of takes a little bit of a step back. And I think you're right. It's very trauma informed. Like maybe she doesn't want to be touched right now, just after what she's just experienced. I thought that was really, really moving.
I was honestly wondering when this was going to show up in the Pit. And, you know, it's a horrific scenario. It does happen. But to kind of show the protocol and how trust is reestablished, I think is important. And, you know, the hope is that if somebody, unfortunately, is going through some type of scenario of sexual assault, they kind of have a little bit more of an understanding of what happens in an ER, the safety, the trust, the precautions. And maybe this convinces one person to go and, you know, regain their agency, get in there.
Yeah. Just even seeing like that woman kind of alone in the frame, alone in the shots, like you can feel the loneliness there. And I just cannot imagine. I mean, I would always want Nurse Dana in my corner, but like, in that moment, she was fully present for that patient. I thought that was really special.
She's explaining each step and kind of showing her this is why we're doing what we're doing, to kind of reassure Alana that she is in control and she has the ability to say no. But, you know, Charge Nurse Dana said the minute I open this forensic kit, I have to stay in the room. Just kind of that clear communication, I think is important.
Yeah. But I also like that she said, you know, you can take breaks. We can pause if you need, if like this feels too overwhelming. Part of me is like, what are these people going to do without her in like the ED, like running, like charge nurse Dana? But it's important that she is like fully present, I think, for Alana. That's really special.
Yeah. Do you think Dr. Al-Hashmi was a little too quick in the scene? Like she did her part. Like you got to make sure you're checking for acute injuries. She was in and out.
No, I sort of like how quick and concise Dr. Al-Hashmi is in that way, because Nurse Dana is the one who's really building a relationship with Alana in that moment. And, you know, you don't want to kind of overwhelm her with like too many people, too much information at the same time.
So I'm just going to slow clap to all the nurses who are fans of the show or watching who are SANE or SAVE trained. You have an incredibly important job.
Uh-oh, this can't be good.
Who's this?
That is hospital CEO Trent Norris. He's the big boss.
Nice outfit.
Hey, Rockstar, gather your staff, please.
Sure, anything you want to tell me first?
No.
Hey, everybody, can you gather around, listen up for a moment, please?
And have your attention, everyone. The internal disaster at Westbridge has been identified as a cyber attack.
So Westbridge is down. There's been a cyber attack. And then another hospital, Old Dominion, is going down too. And preemptively, the big head exec of the hospital comes down and says, we're gonna like cut off all the computers ourselves. We're going back on paper. That I literally gasped so loud. I was watching my dog and she like jumped up and looked at me because I was like, what do you mean every computer's down? And like rushing to take a photo of the board. Oh my gosh.
Any physicians, nurses, anyone who has worked in healthcare for, let's say, more than 10 years, or even in some sites in underserved areas or in international communities, has been in a clinical setting where we did not have electronic charts. Like not having computers at all, that's like even older than that. But when I started residency, you know, I was at a few hospitals where you were paper charting everything.
Oh no.
And we still have these situations where we call them downtime. Sometimes it usually happens in like the middle of the night when they run maintenance and they shut down the electronic medical records, sometimes the computers. And when that happens, you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, you like really realize how much the medical system relies on, well, electricity in general, obviously.
Yeah.
But electronic medical records, like sending prescriptions to pharmacies, sending orders to a radiology center, sending lab orders, like everything happens electronically, including patient records, including triaging patients and the board. Like it's wild. I'm sitting here, I'm like, we should have thought of cyber attack. Like
Why would I think of cyber attack?
because like, you know, it's kind of like happening right now in other news headlines, and like we kind of got this hint about like the uprising of AI in this season. Like I don't know, I feel like I should have thought of that.
That's another thing. I mean, what is Dr. Al-Hashmi going to do with her app now that like there's no
Paper and pencil?
Yeah, how is AI going to help us now? No, I'm like, why can't cyber attacks happen to like things that we really need to be attacked, like student loans? Like, why is it a hospital? Like, what's the benefit there?
Listen, I mean, we're gonna have to cut tape when I say why can't they be attacking that? But the reality is, and this does happen, I've been involved in one of them. Like, well, I shouldn't say I didn't do the attack, but I've been at an institution where hackers held the medical records hostage. But they will essentially prove to a hospital that we can hack into your EMR and give us X amount of money.
Wait, EMR? Oh,
electronic medical records. Give us X amount of money or we're going to release this patient information. And so hospitals over the last few years have really built up stronger security standards, not only in their own IT departments, but also, you know, sending us, physicians, nurses, anyone working in the hospital, more of these trainings, like more ways to look out for phishing schemes on emails and things like that.
Once again, why can't they hack an insurance? Like
Hack
what's stop?
something
Like,
else.
why the hospital? But I think this is a really good moment of tension between Dr. Rabi and Dr. Al-Hashmi again, where Dr. Al-Hashmi is the one who hears about who like learns that they're shutting everything down first. Why couldn't Dr. Al-Hashmi have given Dr. Rabi like a heads up? And why would they tell her and not him?
That is interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like C-suite, the leadership is pitting people in the pit against each other. But it's like, you know, they kind of told her. And I mean, I feel like she should have immediately told Dr. Rabi, like, oh my gosh, like I needed, like that's not the way for him to find out.
Right. Especially when kind of this whole day she's been telling him, like, communicate with me. We are a team. We're doing this together. And then this big piece of information is dropped. And she kind of, you see her, she's like, feels awkward, I guess.
Yeah.
But I kind of wish that they could rely on each other. Maybe like they're both a little bit like not trusting one another completely.
His sabbatical could not come soon enough.
I wonder too how you explain to patients, like, don't freak out, but we don't have computers right now. Like, how's that going to work?
Patients are like, damn it, what now? Like, seriously, this is like the same day where all this is happening, and now we're going to shut down.
Now, like, the wait's going to be even longer. Now, like, there are going to be more diversions.
And guess what? Guess what? They're still probably going to blame the doctors for this.
Mm.
Because that's just what happens. Everything's our fault.
No, not to me.
No, I appreciate you. Let's just make a
Thank you.
PSA of Hunter Harris being like, not everything is the doctor's fault.
All day, we've seen Langdon try to talk to Dr. Robbie, and Dr. Robbie, honestly, very like cold, very cruel, really like playing him off, pushing him away, actively avoiding him. And finally, they are stuck in an elevator together. They have this moment when they're on the roof waiting for another patient. And it is, I mean, you can cut the tension with a knife. Like, I felt so bad for Langdon in that moment.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed our patients' trust. And I'm really fucking sorry. It'll never happen again, I swear.
I'm really glad that you got the help that you need. But I don't know if I want you working in my ER.
It was funny because it almost felt like a weird rom-com motif when like two people are trying to talk and then they get stuck in a room or an elevator and they're forced to like confront their feelings. And I know this isn't a rom-com, but like they're in an elevator together and you're right. Like they kind of look, then they don't look at each other. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, Dr. Robbie, come on. Like, like you know he's trying. You know he went through this. You're leaving for 3 months. I know you're hurt, but say something. Say anything.
I read down the line. I think he says, Langdon is like trying to apologize. And then Dr. Robbie says, I'm really happy that you got the help that you need, but I don't know that I want you working in my ER. That was devastating.
It was.
And then I think Langdon is like so shaken by that. Not only like does he lose this, very clear sense of like brotherhood, friendship, whatever, but also that now Robbie like doesn't trust him as a doctor, like professionally. I think he sees Robbie as such a mentor. Like that's really disappointing. And like you see him almost like deflate in the moment. And then he freezes up later, right, with the patient in front of Dr. Garcia.
And I don't think it was very fair for Dr. Robbie to say it, number one, in that moment, but also without like a longer conversation. Like he followed, from what we know, according to the rules at PTMC, Dr. Langdon followed the protocol. He like took time out, he went to rehab, and I don't know what happened to his privileges in the hospital, for example, but he's back in and he's legit and he's ready to practice. So the hospital is like, yes, you have done what you needed to do and you're ready to go and finish your residency. But Dr. Robbie's like, I don't want you in this ER. So it's a personal issue that he has. It's nothing related or nothing that he can enforce professionally. So I feel like he needs to sit down with Langdon and be like, yo, I have a problem, but you're allowed to practice here according to privileges. But there's a lot more to unpack than that one line. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking it's like very like dark Dr. Robbie this season. Like the way that he talks to Al-Hashmi, the way that he's dealing with Langdon, and even Langdon with the patient who had the leg issue, the waitress,
Man, yeah.
I mean, I like that Nurse Dana was like, okay, either like bring him in or like leave him out, because you like Robbie taking him, sending off to triage. I'm like, what is like, you confront him somehow.
Is it dragging on? Is it dragging on now? Like, are we at the point where like, I just want to see resolution?
No, I kind of like the side of Doctor. I like it. It's very dramatically rich to see him in the wrong in this scenario, because I feel like he is.
That's fair. I'm almost ready for there to be like pick a direction. Like either we're going to work together, or there's going to be like a catastrophic split between the two of them, and so we can just move on to different dramatic arcs. But then all of a sudden, maybe there's a little bit of a foreshadowing when they're treating that patient who got hit with the boat propeller. Because it's like Dr. Robbie's like, Langdon, it's your show. Like he's communicating with his eyes. And like Langdon is like, you just told me you don't want me in your ED, but now I'm going to be directing care. And like, I can almost see it in the acting.
Yeah.
And like Patrick's acting when he's like playing this resident who's like, wait, you don't trust me, but you do trust me. But now I'm being put on this, like, there's a lot happening.
It really felt like bullying to me, honestly, to watch Robbie like kind of send him out without, like, okay, let's see what you can do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is not the Robbie that we know from season 1.
Dang, Robbie the bully.
Yeah.
We've gone there.
No, but I think it's good. I think Noah Wiley plays it really well. Like that
Absolutely.
Real sharp coldness. I'm like, I would not want to be on your bad side.
We've got the return of Abbott, but also we have this like kind of like sexy moment.
What happened to you?
Oh. Bullet grazed my vest.
You were shot?
Shot at. Geniuses thought today was the day to rob a goods warehouse. Didn't think about how long it would take to load the appliances. They panicked. All hell broke loose.
Jesus.
kind of sexy. She walks in on him shirtless, and he's like, there's nothing sexier than like tending to your own wounds.
Is that
I think so.
Especially if it's like a wound that you took, like protecting someone from bullets.
Her saying, someone shot you? No, I was shot at. Like, he's such a cowboy. I love him.
I know. She like, there's like this tension of her, like, let me treat your wound. And also, I need to ask Sean Hattasey about his like chest routine because homie's kind of jacked.
I like how this builds upon like the subtle tension between them from last season, where he is very like Dr. Abbott is very impressed by Dr. Mohan, and I like that now they get this little moment of real flirtation. And I also like that he immediately sort of helps her with Orlando Diaz and kind of like breaks the rules a little bit.
There's also this really quick moment when she's tending to his wound on his back, and Dr. Robbie walks by quickly and like looks in the room and just keeps walking.
It's one of, I think, like iconic double takes that I've ever seen. Like
He's like, what?
He's so like, what's going on? And also, I'm not going to get involved. Like whatever they're doing, that can be theirs. They can leave it privately.
I feel like when you and I watch this show, we have like really fun notes because they're just different. And sometimes these topics, I'm like, oh, they're not big enough to be like a full discussion, but like maybe a quick like bullet point of something that caught your eye.
Okay.
So I was trying to ask you, like, tell me a few moments of this episode, a few details where you were like, oh, like that's fun.
I think 3 very quick things. The difference between Javadi's mom and her dad, like they, you know, her mom is very strict, but like also wants her to go into surgery. Her dad is like a little bit more chill, like do what you want. And I wonder if there's like something different about like their specialties that maybe speak to like those character differences. That was interesting to me. Also, Dr. Abbott kind of liking Dr. Al-Hashmi and Dr. Robbie being like, I don't know, maybe. Like he's still very resistant, very dismissive. And the big CEO's grilling 4th of July outfit. That was funny to me.
I like those.
What were your 3?
So I got my 3 quick things that are obviously going to be a nod to some small medical detail, some workflow detail.
Love
this
it.
episode also has like this subtle nod to kind of burnout in physicians working in crazy scenarios, because you've got this one little moment where you have a doctor sleeping on a patient bed.
Oh, yeah.
Just because take a quick nap, and like that actually does happen. Sometimes we're sleeping on floors and sofas, like whatever, in empty conference rooms just to cut a quick nap in. Whitaker also throws a protein bar to the residents, and he's like, you got to eat on the go because we don't have time to eat. So that was one little kind of theme in this episode.
Yeah.
Also, like, hey, you know, at the ongoing conversation about gun violence in America, Dr. Abbott makes this comment about how even with a bulletproof vest and AR-15 can still cause damage. Like, just to think how powerful those guns are. And last but not least, I am glad that there's a little PSA about the risks of heat-related illness in anyone who's outside when it's hot, but especially our young athletes.
Oh,
and this football player was like, I'm fine. I didn't drink enough water.
And he's like, I have 2 days. Like, I got to get back out there. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're in high school.
You're in high school. You don't need to be pushing yourself. Heat-related illness happens in high humidity, even if people don't realize it because they're losing so much fluid. They're not sweating and cooling as efficiently. I also want to go back to the high school and question the coach and be like, what are you doing in terms of breaks right now? Like that entire scenario is, we see it play out every single summer across the country.
Alok, so much is going on in the pit with this code black, and I think we need to go straight to the source and hear from 2 people who are right in the thick of it. Let's hear from my favorite nurse duo in the pit, Kristin Villanueva, who plays Nurse Princess, and Amielynn Abellera, who plays Nurse Perlah.
Saan yung party ni Javadi?
Wala pa yatang plano.
What? Eh, di kailangan magplano tayo.
Mukha bang 21 si Javadi sa'yo?
Ngayon, oo naman. Nagkakakanda itong lugar na to.
Ay, ano ka?
Hindi ikaw. Hindi ako. Pero yung ibang tao.
Kristin, Amielynn, it is an honor to have you both here. Like a little personal note, I work in a hospital. I work with a lot of incredible Filipino nurses. They are all my kuyas, my ates, my titas. So I'm very stoked to talk to both of you because I think Nurse Perlah, Nurse Princess just hits a relatable note for a lot of people. I want to start with a moment that was pretty important to me, and I think it just really speaks to the dedication. When our favorite patient Louis is coding, Nurse Perlah is like right there. It's like a sixth sense when nurses know what is happening, what physician needs are, what patient needs are. And I think that's true of a lot of nurses. I think you both throughout the series have moments like that. So I was curious if you could comment on how you kind of identified into that role and you transformed into these ER nurses.
Well, speaking of Louis, I think that is Perlah's favorite patient. But I think that is such a beautiful thing about being a nurse is that they are sort of 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead all the time and have a way of anticipating what's about to happen, mostly because they're so experienced. And, you know, I think Nurse Perlah has been working at PTMC for over 5 to 6 years now, all through COVID, working, you know, side by side with Dr. Robbie. And so I think she has learned through, you know, osmotic experience on how to be 5 steps ahead of the doctors, but also still patient and waiting and also ready to support whatever order they're about to make, what road they're going to take.
I think in addition to that too, they're not just amazing at what they do in their profession, but they're amazing humans in the sense that they're very empathetic. So they're very sensitive to energy. And so I can just look at Amielynn / Nurse Perlah, and I know that something's up. You know, we work alongside together. It also helps that we're friends both on camera and off camera. So I can feel her energy and no words are needed.
Raise a glass to that.
True.
I want to talk about the Code Black because in this episode, we learned that it's a cyber attack. How does this change the day for Perlah and Princess?
I know for me, I asked our med techs, our real ER nurses on set, like, if this happens to you right now, what is your reaction? And I don't know if I could use curse words, but they used curse words, like right away. Oh, they're like, fuck me.
Oh,
no.
my God.
No. And yeah, one of them even told me, like, I think they have rules and regulations around that on what they would do, but they haven't drilled it yet. So they're afraid of whenever that first drill will come, or if, God forbid, the actual thing happening. But yeah, it's no bueno.
Yeah. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a pain in the ass, the nurse techs were saying, this is the worst. This is the worst thing that could happen in terms of how do we keep all these balls up in the air and, you know, stay accurate, know how to chart our patients, know who's in which room, how to keep track of everything. And it would just be the worst thing that could happen in terms of trying to stay on top of what we're trying to do in each hour.
You know, when we're looking at situations like the Code Black or patients really ill, Princess and Perlah, all the nurses are almost like the Greek chorus, just like looking at their expressions and their tone sets the stage for how people should be feeling. Like, if things can be tense? Is it not a big deal? Like, that happens in the real world. And you two have this amazing dynamic where you also kind of banter and talk smack in Tagalog, which is this great kind of escape. We get to see what Perlah and Princess are really thinking about. So I was curious about how you thought of weaving in that cultural context and how it found its way into the story.
It's all the writers. Thank God to the writers. Yeah, they would write it in English and then they would say this will be spoken in Tagalog. Yeah. So kudos to them. They know exactly what happens in real hospitals.
Yeah.
I was about to say it's so accurate.
Yeah, it must be. I think so. And it's, you know, call it gossip, call it talking smack. But, you know, I think that Princess and Perlah are just partaking in, you know, Shakespearean asides with each other, you know, and just sharing information with themselves and with the audience, you know, in a meta style, like away from the people that they're observing. And I think you go into any hospital and any workplace, and I think that is almost the joy and in observing humanity in all its foibles and commenting on it and having secrets about it, with observing your coworkers and their flaws, in their, you know, mistakes and their accidents, in their relationships, in their connections and misconnections. And I think that Perla and Princess have been in this hospital for a long time together, and they've seen people come in and out. They know who's senior, they know who's not, and I think it's fun for them, and it allows them to, take a little bit of a break, connecting, and for that to cross with a cultural dimension of Tagalog is, I think, just this wonderful thing to portray in what the reality of a hospital is.
How hard is it to keep track of everything when you have so many scenes, so many patients, and so many people on set?
I have a princess tracker on my Google Doc.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Like, and I don't know why I didn't do it last season, but I did it this season of just, tracking where I was last at, who was the last patient I saw, where are they now? Where are the other patients? Are they getting their CT scan? Did we discharge this patient? Yeah, no, it's very hard. So every time a new episode drops, I'm the same as everyone else. I don't know what happens in that episode.
True. It does, of course, help that we are shooting it in real time. Princess and Perla are in different traumas at different times, and then we leave to go check on our other patient. And Amielynn, as the actor, always has to ask Scripty, how much time has passed? Where was I before this? Because 2 minutes can pass, but that was maybe, I filmed that on Monday, and now we're filming that on the next 2 minutes on Thursday. So it is sort of an actor problem, or that I love figuring out, and also, a Perla problem of, which patients do I need to check up on, and who was I there last. But we've been having fun with that.
Speaking of Amielynn, the actor, and Perla, Amielynn, you come from a family of healthcare professionals, right? Like dad's a doctor and your mother's was a nurse. How much did your personal experience kind of play into you developing the character Perla?
So much. Yes, my dad is a retired family practitioner. He had his own little private practice in Stockton, California. And my mom started out as an RN in the CCU, at the critical care unit, and then upgraded in her 40s to a nurse practitioner. And so I was very familiar with hospital settings, following my dad at rounds and things like that, and also with my mom in the clinic as well. And I think it allowed a familiarity of all the just being comfortable in these spaces, being comfortable in a hospital, being comfortable with the language, even though it's still, I still have to rehearse it quite a bit. But there was definitely a sense of a little bit more comfort in knowing what these tools are inside in a hospital, and what a blood pressure is, and what an IV is, and also just seeing a doctor's dynamic with the patient when observing my father, and then also how it's a little bit different with a nurse's dynamic with my mother, and they work together in the same clinic too. So I really am grateful for being in that space with them, and they've been enjoying watching me sort of bring it to life.
We know that Princess speaks like maybe 4 or 5 languages. How does that add to like the dimensions of her character, and is that fun for you?
They said 6, actually.
Oh, excuse me.
6.
I don't know what the 6 are. Yeah. Oh, it's very fun. I've always been enamored by people who are, is it polyglot? Is that the term for folks who can speak more than 3 languages? I've always been enamored by them and in awe. And I've always loved putting on accents, although I'm not one of those who can just like, I need to study it. Give me a week. But yes, no, it's been fun. It's been great.
Do you speak multiple languages too?
If I'm lost in the jungles of Costa Rica, I could find where the gasoline station is. So in Spanish. So I have emergency Spanish in my back pocket. Tagalog, that's my first language.
Okay.
Yeah. The rest
emergency
TBD.
Spanish.
I'm
Spanish
curious
is
who
good.
you'd be asking the directions from in the Costa Rican jungle, but I like it. I like the scenario.
I mean, luckily they speak Spanish. So in the back of my head, I'm like, when in doubt, say it in Tagalog. It's probably the same in Spanish.
Very similar.
Okay. That makes
Very
sense.
similar, yeah.
Fun series question. Is there anything that either one of you learned from the nursing consultants, the medical writers, that really surprised you about being a nurse in the ER? Was there like an aha moment?
I'm still trying to get over the fact that these are real cases that we're presenting as the reality of an ER department. And the nurses say, yes, this does happen all the time. This is actually what our day is like. And also the trauma of nurses being assaulted, and that fear every day is real, is very real. And that to me is so discouraging and so confusing to how these people who are dedicated to helping and caring and to save their lives are being, acted out against. So that's hard for me. And the nurse techs, really, that's just not water off their back, but they're just like, shrug, yeah, that's the truth. And that's hard for me to swallow.
I think Perla has that line after Charge Nurse Dana gets punched, and she says, we've all been assaulted.
We have all been assaulted. That's just daily life.
Damn, well, I'm glad that the Pitt at least shed awareness and put a light on it, because it's almost like workplace violence against nurses, against doctors is almost normalized. If that happened in any other business, it would not be tolerated for more than a day.
Yeah, correct.
This was awesome.
I think so.
Salamat po. Thank you for all you do.
Salamat. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Lahat ay maganda.
Hey, that's right.
I got some tricks. Appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
I was so excited to talk to them. Like, they're such a relatable part of the show because there's so many incredible Filipino nurses. I was actually sold on the accuracy of the Pitt, because in season 1, when you first hear Nurse Princess, I was like, oh yeah, they did their homework.
I think that they have such good chemistry together, like such a good relationship. I want to be gossiping with them. I want to be whispering with them. I want to know what they have to say. And I do like how they are kind of an audience proxy for, based on what expression they have on their faces. I'm like, okay, so that's how I should be reacting. This is good news or bad news. I can tell immediately from them.
It's totally true. And it's a testament to the preparation they both did and their acting skills. Because if you think about an actual ER, those nurses have seen everything. Depending on how long they've worked, they've kind of been conditioned to it. So if they're freaking out, I'm freaking out. If they're calm, that gives me a little bit of, a little bit of calmness too. And patients and families look to nurses also. They really do set the tone of a busy hospital. I have to nod my hat to Catherine Lanasa, Charge Nurse Dana, and how she handles the entire situation with the survivor of sexual assault. And we know that this interaction is inspired by the actual work that sexual assault nurse examiners do every single day, these SANEs, as we call them. And we are fortunate enough to talk to an actual SANE from Pittsburgh, Dr. Kathleen Sekula. I'm so honored that she's going to take the time to speak to us about her work, because it is extremely important and necessary.
And definitely very inspiring. To start off, Dr. Sekula, can you tell us what SANE is and how it fits into the healthcare system?
Okay, SANEs are sexual assault nurse examiners, and they're specially trained to assess and treat patients who have been victims of really any types of assault, but sexual assault in particular. And sexual assault nurse examiners just really came into being in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And forensic nursing then started to be recognized.
When you were advising on the show, was there something very important to the SANE process that felt urgent to get right?
Yeah, I think there were a few things. One of the biggest misconceptions in caring for a patient who's been assaulted is that they all present in the same way, and they should present as being very sad and being upset, when in fact they can present to the unit in many different ways. Some of them can be totally silent. Some may be very anxious, that's expected. And we've had, some of them might be giggling, and that's their reaction to anxiety. And so for a long time, nurses and physicians, saw these patients when they came into the unit as being maybe faking or, being not credible in some way. And now we know that they present in many different ways when they come in. So it's very important. And most hospitals, most emergency departments now are working very hard to get SANEs on board so that they're 24 hours, or at least that you have a SANE that you can call in who's on call if a case comes in, because they take a long time. And that was the other thing that I think people aren't aware of. A case usually takes somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to complete.
What does it actually take in terms of training to become certified and to become a SANE?
It takes learning how to collect evidence. So that's a big part of it. But the other thing is to learn how to assess the patient, because they're different. They're different type of patients, even though most patients coming into the ED are anxious. But the assault patient is different. The sexual assault victim especially presents in a different way. We teach nurses who are training to become SANEs that you really respect their personal space very, very clearly. You ask them, you let them know if you're going to touch them, because they have just been violated. So we talk about it as trauma-informed care. So we give back to the patient control over what's going on.
Kathleen, what does the path to becoming SANE certified in terms of like a protocol look like? Is it something that, you go to a specific program to do? Can you do it within your own hospital under a mentor? And do you see a trend, more nurses wanting to become SANE certified, or is there a gap?
We have many more nurses becoming SANE certified. So first they take a didactic course, and that's like 40 to 60 hours of being online with expert nurses who are teaching them all about the process, what it's like to interface with the emergency department and throughout the hospital. And then after they've completed the didactic course, we provide them with hands-on a three-day, 8 to 5 every day hands-on course where they learn and they actually do the exams. And then after that, they go back to their home clinical setting. And if they're very, very lucky, there's another SANE who's been practicing who can then take over preceptorship with them and help them until they feel that the nurse is ready to do it on their own. And then once certified, they have to renew that certification every 3 years, I believe it is.
We could take a break, no problem.
I don't want to break. I want to stop.
Okay. Is this about reporting? Because you can do this collection without a police report for now, and none of it goes in your permanent medical record.
I don't want to do this anymore.
So in the SANE examination, you're collecting evidence, but what does support look like from law enforcement, or how does that relationship work as you're doing this work?
One of the things that we have been able to make a tremendous change in is our relationship with legal and with, the especially police departments here in the Pittsburgh area. We met with the chiefs of police and we talked to them about why it's important for the police to understand where they would take a victim to that particular setting. We want them to know where there are SANEs practicing. Now we have a lot more SANEs here in the Pittsburgh and surrounding area, but at a time, there were only a couple hospitals that had SANEs that they could either call in or that were on board all the time. Our relationship with lawyers, SANEs can testify as both a fact witness, which would be they collected the case, they talked to the patient, they documented everything, or they can testify as an expert witness, or as both, if they've been practicing for a long time. So we have good relationships with law enforcement throughout.
How else do you think that the culture around SANE and this kind of trauma-informed care has evolved over time?
I think through education, and then feedback from some of my research is my background is in psych mental health before I became a forensic nurse. And I still am an advanced practice psychiatric nurse. However, I see the patients, the victims. We use both the word survivors and victims. It's just interesting that over the years, people have come to realize that we were not doing things right with victims of sexual assault. First and foremost, and when I first started practicing, those patients would sit in the waiting room for hours, and many of them would just get up and leave. Now hospitals know that that's not good care, that when a patient comes in and they say they have been sexually assaulted, if the SANE is working that day, or we call them in with the advocate, and we get them in as soon as we possibly can. So we've learned a lot. And, I think we've educated our fellow nurses and physicians this trauma-informed care and understanding, even police officers. This is a wonderful thing that's happened over the past, I would say, 5 years, is that even policemen now believe that they should wait to really intensely interview the patient or the victim. Sometimes they'll wait a day or two. They'll come in and they'll get just an initial story, and then they'll set up a time with the patient to meet with them in a day or two. It used to be everybody was having them tell their story. The nurse was having them tell, the advocate, the police officer for sure. And so then when they go to court, the police officer would testify sometimes, well, that's what she told the nurse when she went in, but that's not what she told me. So now we've gotten that down so that we only have the patient tell their story once if we possibly can. And then we give the patient time to settle, for their anxiety level to decrease. We know from research that many memories of what happened come back to them within the first 24 to 48 hours. And so they're just a better narrator of what happened if you give them time to decrease their anxiety.
Wow, I cannot imagine the pressure of having to, recount everything again and again and again, especially in a moment of trauma. If someone has been sexually assaulted, or if they love someone who's been sexually assaulted, what would you say should be like their first course of action immediately following the attack?
The first thing that we would want them to do, we want them to report it to either call the police department, or just present at the hospital and say, I've been sexually assaulted. And if we can get them to do that, it's much better than if they wait for 48 hours or 72 hours and then report. Not that we can't get evidence even then, we can, but it's not as easy. And on college campuses, and we had some grant funding, some large funding from the Department of Justice, where we did training with health departments in the universities and colleges. And so we even have new guidelines for colleges and universities to train their student body to talk about, if this happens to a friend of yours, this is something you can do. You can't force them. You should never force them. But you can try to talk with them and say, I'll go with you to the hospital, or I'll call the police for you. But it's ideal when they come, right after it's happened.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much.
No, Kathleen, thank you for sharing your insight, and thank you for doing what you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed your podcast.
Oh, we appreciate that.
I was so moved by Dr. Sekula and like the important work that she's doing. And I guess I never really thought about how specific and how highly skilled you have to be to be a SANE and to collect evidence, but also to be like an empathetic listening ear to someone, maybe on like one of the worst days of their entire life.
It's like they have 3 jobs at once and they're taking their time. And I appreciate that in the show, when Charge Nurse Dana took on this role, it basically spanned the entire episode. She was focused on that patient. They didn't shortcut anything. And they actually gave it the attention it deserved. And a lot of that is thanks to the medical consultants, in this case, Dr. Sekula, who made sure that the process was accurate, it was thorough, just like it is in real life.
Yeah, and also I think it's a good, reflection opportunity to like check our biases, that we don't know how someone is going to react, and that someone might not always like come in crying or come in super emotional. And with Alana, she definitely seemed very vulnerable, and I liked that Dana did not really like try to smother her, like try to be too affectionate or too understanding, because I don't know that that would have worked.
You have to build trust, which Charge Nurse Dana does. But what also really infuriates me in many situations, and I've been in this situation and talking to patients, survivors sometimes feel like, what's the point? Like, they feel powerless or feel like the institutions or powerful individuals or people with money are going to get away with it. So they don't want to relive the trauma. So SANEs also have this job of providing that reassurance in a protected space, as well as ensuring someone, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that law enforcement catches who did this and saves other people. It's an incredibly daunting process to think about. And I'm just so glad that there are people who are trained and who do this efficiently.
And I think, speaking of Dr. Sekula's area of expertise, the idea that the way that we treat victims and survivors and the level of empathy and the level of understanding, the fact that now, like, you're not immediately interrogated about what happened, that they take statements like days later, really speaks to how like the culture around sexual violence, I think, is turning in our favor, that there is a lot more understanding and empathy.
Well said.
Thank you for watching today's episode of the Pitt Podcast. You know where to find us every Thursday right here after the new episode drops. And share your comments, your questions. Also, shout out to all the nurses out there.
You can watch us on HBO Max or listen wherever you get your podcasts. The Pitt Podcast is a production of HBO Max in collaboration with PRX. The executive producer of PRX is Jocelyn Gonzalez. Our managing producer is Courtney Florentine. Our editor is Lucy Perkins. Our production managers are Edwin Ochoa and Tony Carlson. Our video producer and editor is Anthony Q. Artis, with assistant editor Damon Durrell Hinson. This show is engineered by Tommy Bazarian. Special thanks to Joe Carlino.
The executive producer of HBO Podcasts is Michael Gluckstadt. The senior producer is Allison Cohen-Sirokach, and the associate producer is Aaron Kelly. Technical director is Insung Kwang. I'm Alok Patel.
And I'm Hunter Harris. We'll see you next week in the Pit.